My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm cloud hired.
So I'm cloud hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm cloud hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am cloud hired. See!
I am cloud hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glow Cloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs, and we are here today to help you build your technology career. Maybe you're looking to become a cloud architect. Maybe you're looking to become a security architect. Maybe you're looking to become an enterprise architect or an AI architect. Well, I'm here to assist you. My name is Mike Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've held pretty much every architecture role you can think of for the last 25 years. I've spent over 2 decades training people, coaching people, helping them to get their first architecture jobs, negotiating raises. And you can find my clients at Apple, Amazon, Cisco, Google, IBM, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Zscaler, Netspo, Palo Alto Networks, and any other prestigious organization you can think of. And I remember what it was like starting out in my career, where I really had no idea where to start, where I got given bad advice from a whole bunch of people that were also looking to find a job and no one knew where to went. And as soon as I actually had the list of all the things I needed to do, it was only a matter of months. And I got my first job as a senior network engineer. I was a network architect 3 months later. And within 2 years, I was a principal architect because I knew the steps to take. And that's why I'm here completely free to help you. I look forward to answering these questions. I see they're already coming in, and that makes me very, very happy. Prior to answering those questions, I'd like to tell you about a few things we have going on. Tomorrow, we have a webinar on how to become a cloud architect. On that webinar, we will talk about exactly what we do as cloud architects, exactly the skills you need as a cloud architect, and what you need to do to get hired. Because I promise you, if all you do is get AWS certifications, even all 13 of them, no one's going to care. It's not going to be what's going to get you your solution architect job, your cloud architect job, because it's a different job. And I want you to know every skill that you need to learn, exactly what you need to project on an interview, so you get that first cloud architect job. So join me on the completely free webinar tomorrow. It'll be live, it'll be free, it'll be on Zoom. And after we speak about the role for a little bit, I'll answer any questions you have about your career, want me to assess your LinkedIn profile because you're not getting calls from recruiters, what have you. I'm happy to do that. Ask any questions I can, and I'll do anything I can in these free webinars to assist you in your architect career. So I hope to see you tomorrow on that free webinar. I also want to let everybody know that right now we have 50% off on all of our programs for our summer savings. So if you'd like to join us, now's a great time to take advantage of it. Now, at this point, Chris, please bring in the questions that are coming in. My team. Tommy J. Hi, Mike. In an organization that has both business architects and enterprise architects, how does the interaction between the two exist? Who gets paid more and who is more valuable? So, Tommy, let me first give you the secret to earning more in your architect career. The more business acumen you have, The greater your communication skills are, the greater your emotional intelligence, the greater your leadership skills are, the greater your CXO relevance, and the greater your executive presence and your ability to exercise influence and sell, the greater your seller will be in either a business architect or an enterprise architect. And if I have an enterprise architect with more business acumen than a business architect, chances are they're going to be earning more. So business acumen is truthfully the key division. I've worked both as a business architect and an enterprise architect, and I have to tell you, I love both. And here's how I would describe the difference. Business architecture, what we do there is we're more management and strategy consultants. And our focus is all people, processes, and technology, like all strategy consultants. But for us, it's more people and more process oriented. When I spend more time as a business architect, it's more about the corporate strategy, potentially a corporate reorganization to do things more efficiently. It's more high level business. And most of our time is with the C-suite and the key stakeholders of that organization when I do business architecture work. And when I do enterprise architecture work, even though it's a people, processes, technology job, just like the business architect, the enterprise architect is what I call a light business architect in most cases. Now, sometimes you get people like me that worked as management consultants that went and got MBAs, that went and got probably $100,000 of education in business acumen after my MBA. And now we're working as enterprise architects, and now we're operating at all levels. That can happen too. But for the most part, the enterprise architect is about an 80% business executive, 20% technology professional, and the business architect is 100% business technology professional. So you'll find both business architects and enterprise architects at the same company. For example, Deloitte will have their business architects in their strategy consulting division, and yet they'll have their architects that are doing strategic technology consulting. So there is a touch point where the enterprise architect is still working on business architecture, but it's more mapping it out. It's less optimization of the business architecture unless they're an extreme executive. Whereas the enterprise architect is more focusing upon the technology, the future technology, blueprints, removing technology redundancies, for example, standardization, removal of technical debt. So I know architects that earn $1 million a year as enterprise architects, and I know $1 million a year management and strategy consultants who are business architects. So they're both valuable. They're both critically needed. The question is where you really want to be. Great question, Tommy J. I love this question. Chris, let's bring in the next one. Are some enterprise architects also expected basically to do or incorporate business architecture in your role? Tommy, if you're an enterprise architect, you must be focused on business architecture, because the disconnect that we have with most of the cloud architectures, most of the solutions architectures, is you've got the business that's focused on doing it one way, and somehow you got the tech people that are doing it another way. And imagine you were a photographer and you needed to go do a certain kind of a photo shoot, and you required special cameras and special lenses based upon the photo shoot. Now, imagine if you knew what you needed and somebody else packed your bag for you, and they packed the wrong kind of camera and the wrong kind of lenses because they didn't know what you need. Well, Tommy J, in 80% of technology situations and 80% of technology expenditures, sometimes up to 90, the tech people design something and the business people have no use for it. So that would be like someone packing a camera bag for you that knows nothing of photography. And that's the big problem we have. So if the cloud architect isn't involved in business architecture, their architecture will fail. If the enterprise architect isn't involved in business architecture, their architecture will fail. Because otherwise, if you really think about it, the whole point of digital transformation, the whole point of enterprise architecture is to make sure that we understand the business, we understand the business's strengths and weakness, how the business operates, where the business's pain points are, and then we're trying to solve those pain points. And then we also have to think about how the employees do their job, what's the best way for employees to do their job, and then what technology will the employees need to do their job better. Now, how will the customer access the project, the companies, whatever they offering? How do we make it more frictionless? How do we make it a smoother experience? How does that equate to more dollars coming in on revenue? That's where our job is enterprise architects, and to a degree, business architects as well. Hope that helps. Can I please explain what is meant by architects needing to understand business cost structure? Absolutely, Tommy J. So, Tommy, you always know how I always talk about business acumen that's needed for the job of any architect. Because without business knowledge, you can't do the job. So, let's talk about what business cost structure actually is. So, if we think about a business cost structure, it's going to outline all of the expenses a company would incur to operate and deliver its projects. So, the point of understanding and mapping this out is if we know where the organization spends its money, we have the opportunity to optimize architecture potentially, to reduce costs in certain area. We understand how that cost structure impacts the budget, the pricing, and strategic decision making, what we can do versus what we can't do. And that's going to be critical input for the architecture. And for example, we have to look at things that are, say, fixed costs that are going to remain constant, like regardless of what happens. For example, the real estate where the people are, potentially data centers, if we have them, what have you, they're fixed costs. And then, of course, the business is going to have variable costs, things that they can actually change. Variable costs could be employee expenses, for example, because they could cut them down if they needed to. Variable costs could be if they're renting something, they could cut back on something that they're renting. So there are things an organization can choose that would say variable costs, less money spent on advertising, for example. And then we look at semi-variable costs, because not everything is cut and dry like that. We may have costs that are, example, like a utility that we kind of all have, even though we can mitigate to some degree. So potentially we can influence it a little bit. And then, of course, there's very direct costs that are related to cost of production of a product or a service, materials, labor. And those are costs we can't get out of. Like for a cloud provider, the cost of processors, the cost of storage, the cost of RAM, that type of thing. So when we understand the business and we understand how the business is spending money, we possibly have an opportunity. Spending too much money here, maybe we can automate that with AI and reduce that expense. Now, if we automate that with AI and we get a return on investment, now where do we have additional money we can invest elsewhere? And that's going to be the concept of the enterprise architecture, the people, the processes, and technology. Now, this will be critical for any cloud architecture too. Tommy, that's a really great question. I love that question. I don't get asked those kind of enterprise architecture questions all the time, and it always makes me happy when I see them. Chris, let's bring in the next question. What are the core skills to get hired? Snooker, I want to help you. Could you tell me what the job is that you want to get hired for? Because the core skills of a cloud architect are very different than the core skills of a cloud engineer. The core skills of a security architect are very different than the skills of an AI architect. The skills of a network engineer is very different than a cloud engineer. So if you tell me the career you want, I will get you there. That way, because otherwise it's kind of like, which plane do you get on at the airport? And unless you know the destination, you don't know. But I want to answer your question, and we'll come back to that with some generic things. But I hate to be generic. I want to be specific. Chris, let's go to the next one and come back to this. How do you move from cloud engineer to cloud architect? Is it just time and experience, or there's a different way of thinking, a different mindset? Savinam, I want to make it very clear. Cloud engineering has absolutely zero to do with cloud architecture. It's the same as the flight attendant who keeps people safe in their seats and the airplane pilot who actually wants to fly the plane. So we're going to keep that. Now, Smoker, could you tell me what kind of role in security? Architect, engineer, by the way, and after that, I'll get to that as the next question. So the key is when I train someone, I'll give you examples. Nafuli was someone that never worked in tech before, and we trained him to be an architect, an enterprise architect, and he took an enterprise architect role as a CTO. It was his first job. Now, why am I going to say this? Jermaine was selling landscaping gear, and it took about a year to get him hired as an architect. There's a reason I'm going to say this. Yvonne, for example, was hired by AWS in 6 months, and his last job was a waiter. And Balwinder was a stay-at-home mom, hired as a cloud solutions architect at Microsoft in about a year. Now, what I'm also going to tell you is Jazz was a student of mine. He had been a cloud engineer for about a decade, and it took me about 14 months to get him hired by AWS because we had to get him to unlearn engineering, unlearn the engineering mindset, and become an architect, which is often harder than if you were not from that background. Harsha is another example. Harsha is a cloud engineer and probably the best Kubernetes expert that I've ever met. He is a rock star. He is a genius. He had a decade of cloud engineering experience. It took closer to 18 months to get him that first cloud architect job because it's a big mindset shift going from engineering to architect. So I'll use Jeffrey as an example. Jeffrey came to us as a geologist and he was hired by Kalian as a solutions architect within about 6 months. And then I'll use Loga, who was a rock star of a DevOps engineer. Wow, she was powerful. Wow, she was smart, but it took a little over a year to get her to transition from engineer to architect. And I can tell you someone like Camille, who was a nurse, took our program and within a year was working as the director of cloud architecture somewhere. So engineering and architecture are just different skills. And here's the reason, Vinam. As a cloud engineer, what you might be doing is writing a Python script, an infrastructure as code script, for example, like a Terraform script. You might be installing applications on servers. You might be deploying these applications. And that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. But it won't help you with any of the things that we do as an architect. For example, half of what you'll have to do as an architect is be able to communicate with the C-suite, learn about their business. A lot of what we have to do about an architect is building a business case, for example, to show the company that the investment they spend in technology will deliver a return on investment and how and when it will deliver that return on investment. Something we do as an architect is write thought leadership documents, create architectural artifacts. Things we do as architects are respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs. Things we do as architects are create architectural review boards, evaluate trade-offs and how it will impact the business. Things that we have to do as architects is understand the business structure, understand the key business processes, and understand the impact of technology, good or bad, on those business processes. What we have to do as an architect is lead a team, an architecture team of 15 to 50 people. And in addition to things like that we typically need to manage stakeholders, we need to manage vendors. And on top of that, we have to lead the architecture team because we are focused on business optimization. The engineers are focused on doing. And unfortunately, the people that actually build the bridges and build houses don't get asked to design them because the doing skills have honestly nothing related to architecture skills. So I can tell you that I've seen both. I can tell you what I did to move out of an engineering role into an architect role, and then I can tell you what you could do. One is we could train you, and we were very experienced. If not, here's what I did, Because I knew I lacked the business acumen for bigger architecture roles, I went and got a master's in business administration. And when I got into my first executive architect role, my management sent me to executive presence training. They sent me to CXO relevancy training. They sent me to sales training. There was a tremendous amount of training, at least probably $20,000 on executive presence. There was a lot about any kind of leadership, any kind of management, any kind of soft skill, empathy, emotional intelligence that you can imagine. And that's typically what people like me have done. We've gone there, we've done the business school. So all you have to understand, and I want you to join our webinar tomorrow, and we'll go over the role. We'll talk about what we do, and I'll give you the exact skill list we need, Venom, because I really want to help you, but don't think that engineering prepares you for architecture. And here's the reason why. I talked about managing stakeholders. I talked about executive presence. I talked about leadership. I talked about strategy. The only thing else I'm going to talk about is the tech, understanding the network and data center technologies and how to design them. So if we understand that, let's say I have someone that's a software developer. They know how to code, right? Now, they probably even know the way applications are architected. That's all great, but here's the problem. Architects don't code. Architects don't touch the technology, so they won't have the sales, the business, whatever. Now, give me someone like Wallace Agana, who was a student of ours. You can see a YouTube video. His first tech job as an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase Bank in England. He came to me as a sales rep. So he already knew the ability to exercise influence. He already had the ability to manage stakeholders. He already had the ability to sell. He already had the ability to present. And he knew how to communicate to the C-suite. He had the business acumen and the CXO relevancy. So for him, he only had to learn the tech. Now, if you give me someone that's, say, a software developer, they still have to learn the cloud. That means things like the network, it means things like compute, it means things like storage, it means things like security. They have to learn that, and then they have to learn all the business skills. where I had Wallace Sagana, who was a sales rep, who already had half the skills because these jobs are 3/4 business. And all I had to teach him the tech was there was only 25% of the skills to learn. And that's why it was so easy for him. The key here to remember is being on me is anybody can get an architect job. I used to practice internal medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. Within 9 months later, I was an architect, a network architect, and I loved it. But at the same time, very recently, Emmanuel got his first job as a security architect, and it was his first tech job. And I see these examples every day that I can give you. So you can do it. You just have to have the architect skills, which are very, very different than cloud engineering skills. Likewise, Venom, a cloud architect would have no ability to work as a cloud engineer without retraining because it's a different job. So I hope that answered your question. Please come to the architecture webinar tomorrow. I can definitely go over the exact skills and I'll tell you every step you need to take along the way. Snooker, could you please tell me what you would like to do in security? Because basically in security, there's basically 3 major classifications of roles. We have the people like me that design the security strategy for an organization. We're called security architects. We have the security engineers that, for most part, do the building out of the designs that we create to protect the organization from harm. We have what you call ethical hackers, which are penetration testers that are paid to break into organizations to tell them the vulnerabilities they have. Each one of these security roles has extremely different skills. I'm not including any of the junior level operations things because those roles can be taken over by AI. So could you tell me which of the 3 you want? Because honestly, all 3 have a completely different path. And I want to be very specific and help you. And that's why most people go wrong is they say, I want to learn security, and they end up learning security, but they learn everything other than the skills they need. I really, really want to help. So please tell me what you'd like to do of those 3 options I gave you. These days, some people, mainly YouTubers, are saying the AWS Solutions Architect exam has now become less important than the CCNA. Please share your views. And today, is it a good day to take the AWS exam? So if you look at the videos I've said for 5 years, I made it very clear that the AWS Solutions Architect professional will not get anyone, any job, anywhere, anytime. Now, the reality is in today's world, the CCNA will not get anyone, any job, anywhere, and anytime. And here's the reason. There's a massive difference between the skills you need to get hired and what's taught in a certification. So when I started my network architect career, I locked myself in a room, passed the CCNA, took a $10,000, $11,000 CCNP bootcamp, got a CCDA, got a CCDP, and guess what? Not a single person in the world was willing to hire me. And then I started learning what hiring managers wanted. I spoke to lots of them to find out. I filled in the skills, and within 3 months had a network engineer job as a senior network engineer. 3 months later was a lead architect and was a principal architect 2 years later. Now, what's the problem with the AWS Solutions Architect exam? What's the problem with the CCNA? Why is it that nobody's going to get hired with just a certification? And this applies to all careers. So I'd like you to see skills in your mind is what gets you hired. And I'd like you to see the certification as a pretty bow on you that says the skills. So when I came to my last life, I spent 7 years in school. And after I'm a nurse practitioner, and after I was learned how to practice internal medicine, 7 years after all the school, then I took my boards and I was allowed to professionally practice. I had my own clinic in Philadelphia. It took me 7 years before I was allowed to take the exam. So after the boards, people knew I had the skills to do the job, and immediately I had a job because I had the skills. Now, when you take an AWS Solutions Architect exam, what are they teaching you? They're teaching you that it's the name of something that Amazon calls something, a vocabulary test, and how to configure it. Now, I'd like to make it very clear. How to configure it doesn't even matter. AI can do that anymore. And the way they teach how to configure it in these certifications is at such a junior level that it would never be enough for anything in the real world. So the problem is there's no skills in these certifications. So what you have to do is you have to learn the skill before you learn the certification. The same way a physician goes to medical school first, gets the skills, and after they have the skills, they pass their boards, then they're allowed to, then they actually mean anything. So, for example, if I were to give you like the cloud architect skills list, for example, let me tell you what the skills are, and then I'll tell you what's on the exam. What's on the exam is exactly exactly the name of something and how to configure it. But here's what you actually need to know as an architect. Well, for one of the first set of skills you need to have is something real. I'll start with the business skills. You need to be able to sell an architecture, meaning I've sold billion-dollar architectures and no one wakes up and says, Mike, how do you spend $1 billion on mine? So you have to understand their business and you have to be able to show them the impact of their business. Now, in order to create an architecture, for example, and let's say you took the Solutions Architect Professional certification, it teaches you the name of something and how to configure it, but you don't configure anything as an architect. But you will have to speak to the C-suite. You will have to communicate to the C-suite. You will definitely need to communicate across a wide variety of stakeholders, manage the stakeholders' expectations, and influence the stakeholders into making a good decision for the company. Now, that's going to take some stellar communication skills. Now, the last part of a solutions architect interview is a presentation in front of a panel of people. But you know what's missing from the AWS Solutions Architect Professional? Any presentation skills. And that's why we have our architecture programs. We teach 100% of the skills. Now, as an architect, you'll be responding to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs, and you're going to need to have very good writing skills and executive writing skills. And we obviously teach people how to do that. And you're going to have to lead an architecture team of 15 to 50 people for 6 to 12 months. And guess what's in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional? 0 of this. You'd still have to do these things as a network architect too. Now, if you don't have executive presence where you can walk in and command the room, you won't be hired. If you can't communicate to the C-suite in the language they care about, whether that's discussing EBITDA or CAGR, what have you, and you're communicating in tech, you can't do the job. If you don't understand business enough to understand how to optimize business, you won't be able to do the job. And of course, that's not in the AWS Solutions Architect Professional. And if you don't know how to negotiate between stakeholders, business units, you won't be able to do the job. Now, let's talk about the tech skills. You need to know networking. And do you know what's missing from the AWS Advanced Networking? All the networking, things like BGP, IP addressing, subnetting, supernetting, route aggregation, for example. Things like understanding switching, things like VLANs, VLAN tagging, VLAN trunking, what have you. That's all missing from these certifications. Understanding when to use NAT, the types of NAT, the type of wide area networking technology to use. It's not in that certification. So you won't be able to understand anything without learning these things. You'll have to understand compute, and whether that be a CPU, whether that be a VM or a container or application virtualization or a serverless function. You need to know what and where and how and why to use these, what the strengths and weaknesses of these approaches are. You need to understand storage and when to use block storage, object storage, file storage, the weaknesses and performance limitations, and the workarounds, which guess what, are all missing from the AWS certification. When it comes to security, it's missing all the relevant things on zero trust, next generation firewalls, IDS, IPS systems, SIEM and SOAR systems, and anything necessary to actually create an optimized security environment. So realistically speaking, it's fine as a certification after you have the skills. But if you don't have the skills, you'll never get a job. And I know that. And that's why when people get certification training, it breaks my heart, because all they learn is that vocabulary and then they can't get hired. And that's why so many people come to me certified, and they come to me certified and a year later, now they're hired, because we have to fill in those gaps. But we get people hired all the time. So please understand, it's not that the certification exam is bad. It's that the certification exam doesn't have anything to do with the actual skills for your career. But then again, the board certification that a physician takes, that wouldn't be enough to make them a physician and be capable. Anybody could study and prepare for that boards in probably 6 months and pass them. But it takes that 7 years of school to be able to do the job. So that's the thing. It's not that any certification is good or bad. The real formula for getting hired is this. First, develop really great skills for the career you want, top 25% skills, and nobody cares about your experience. Then become what the hiring manager wants. Then, when you have that, building a real portfolio that proves you can do the job, then it's certifications, branding, resume work, and then it's interview training and making sure you master the interview. That's the way we train people, and that's the way I suggest, because the certifications by themselves are nothing. The certifications with skills are everything. It's a magical combination. Information security architecture with C-level collaboration. Wonderful. Thank you for this. Now I know how to assist you. So the core skills to get hired as a security architect are going to be as follows. All those business skills that I previously talked about, the executive leadership, the emotional intelligence, the executive presence, business acumen, sales resume, all that will be absolutely, absolutely critical. But in this case, we're going to need some additional skills that are going to be very specific to the security architect career. So what are those actual skills? Well, I'll give you a list of the technical skills since we talked about the other ones. So the skills that you're going to need are going to fall under several different categories. Risk management will be one category. Network security, for example, will be another. Data security would be another category. Application security would be another category you need to learn about. IAM would be another category of security, physical security, cryptography would be another area, and then framework. So let me get pretty specific so you kind of have an idea of what you really need to learn. And we have a security architect webinar we run periodically, and we're going to run one soon. So sign up for any of our webinars, and I'll be very detailed and very specific on these webinars because I have. But let's talk about the real tech skills that you're typically dealing with for a security architect. Risk management. Because you're going to have to identify and classify assets, understand how to catalog critical systems, data, applications, to be able to assess the risk by evaluating the threats against an organization, the vulnerabilities that exist, and the potential impact of these threats becoming a reality. You will have to understand how to prioritize risks by the likelihood of business impact and the dollar volume of each risk. And when you understand risk, you're going to have to design controls to mitigate it. A control could be, for example, a firewall. A control could be a banner, a preventative control. A control could be transfer the risk to another third party like an insurance company. Now, under risk management, things like designing incident response procedures, strategic plans, business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans. There's a lot of that. And I just released a video on business continuity and disaster recovery planning today. It's free. Chris, drop a link for that in the description of this. I think it'll be helpful to people. But under risk management, creation and management of risk registers, what have you. Now, when it comes to network security, you're really getting deep. So networking has a lot of security. So things like network access controls like 802.1x to keep people off the network unless they're allowed to be. Things like packet filters like access control lists, firewalls, next generation firewalls. Understanding how to segment your systems, perhaps in VLANs, perhaps in VPCs, with ACLs, with micro-segmentation, say a private VLAN, that kind of thing. The ability to understand traffic shaping, traffic policing, and queuing to, for example, mitigate worms, DDoS attacks, and encryption on the network, things like IPsec, TLS, what have you. Now, data, there's a fair amount of data security we architects are involved in, especially as security architects, things like data classification, controlling access to data, ensuring the data's integrity, that it hasn't been changed, preventing data exfiltration, data loss, what have you, encryption of data, data lifecycle management, and a lot of data privacy things, think like tokenization, obfuscation, what have you. Now, there's a lot that goes into application security. And no, I don't mean you're going to be coding, but things like understanding how the engineers could be doing code checks along the way, things that go into secure design of applications, for example, input validation, secure session management between systems, what have you. And when it gets into IAM in today's world, identity and access management, zero trust are becoming more and more critical because of the weaknesses of cloud security. So now we'll be dealing with a lot more federated IAM, cloud access security brokers, context-aware IAM, much more single sign-on. And the key is to understand the types of authentication mechanisms and authorization mechanisms and the strengths and weaknesses of each approach, and the ability to evaluate trade-offs between them. A little bit about physical security. It's not a big part of our job as security architects, but sometimes it is. Things like fences, guards, dogs, fire suppression, emergency preparedness, making sure you've got generator fuel, for example, food and shelter for people should there be an emergency. Fair amount of cryptography goes into our roles and understanding symmetric versus asymmetric and public key cryptography and digital signatures and the types of cryptography you would need and the strengths and weaknesses of each approach. Things like hashing, for example, to make sure the message is still haven't been changed, but also how do you prevent attacks on the cryptographic system, things like salting your hashes, for example. They're your main elements of the security architect career. They're the technical elements. And of course, the business elements are the ones that I previously talked about. So look, this is the greatest job in the world. It pays on average about $229 a year, although I know lots of people that are earning far more in security architecture. There is a massive shortage and no one can even do the job. And I can tell you why people are actually failing these interviews, specifically in security architecture. So you heard me be very specific, asking you questions about what you wanted, and here's the reason why. These are the actual statistics. So according to Gartner, 60% of the people that actually apply for architecture roles in security don't know the difference between security architecture and security engineering, so they have the wrong skills and don't get hired. Now, McKinsey actually did another report, and they found that 60% of the people out there just didn't have that wanted an architecture role, a security architecture role, didn't have the business acumen or executive communication, and they couldn't be hired for them. That's McKinsey. Now, the ISACA, another security organization, said that the inability of security professionals to design an end-to-end architecture is why security people are failing the interview. And according to the ISC squared, 77% of people fail an interview because they lack understanding of governance, risk, and compliance. And to the previous question, over certification, according to Foot Partners, is one of the things keeping people from getting architecture roles, because they keep focusing on how to, and lack the executive presence, what have you. And the last reason people don't get hired as security architects goes back to those presentation skills I keep talking about. That's all very big number why people miss those jobs. So that's why I'm so glad you asked the question. That's why I'm so glad we got to be pretty specific. Come to an architecture webinar. You can even come to the cloud one tomorrow, and I'll talk about the cloud one on the security one for you, and I'll answer any questions you have. Sign up. It's free on Zoom. Well, if you meet face-to-face, we'll talk, and it's free. So Chris, make sure you put the link to how to join our architecture webinar tomorrow. Francisco, hi, Mike. What do you think of the Cloud Security Posture Manager? Is it a good way to transition from your current role to as a security engineer? What do you want to do, Francisco? Could you tell me what you mean by that? What's your goal? And I can tell you if it's a good transition set. Do I have a must-read books for someone looking to move into solutions architecture roles? I actually have a list of 20 books that I recommend. They won't be enough by themselves to get an architectural role, but they will probably give you 50 or 60% of what you need. And I actually made 2 videos, one on the business books and one on the tech books. And Chris, drop a link to both videos, the business books for solutions architect and the textbooks for solutions architects. No, Vino, I can tell you what's going to be in these books. There's going to be a lot of knowledge on networking, a lot of knowledge on security, a lot of knowledge on data centers, and a lot of knowledge on everything critical to design a cloud computing. There's also going to be on that reading list things to avoid, like the mistakes to make, most of which come out of certifications that you don't want to make, and the reality of the cloud. The second list will be things related to sales, marketing, presence, business acumen, and I tried to combine it into 20 books there. I will tell you, I read over 3,000 books in my career. Now, admittedly, half of them were probably ebooks because I had a commute of 4 to 6 hours a day, and I used to listen to ebooks the entire time. But the key is you got to get started somewhere. These will give you a really good start, and I know they will be a big help to you in your IT architecture career. I love these questions today. Keep them up. These are great questions. Please feel free to ask any question. I really do want to help you. Hi, Mike. Which role should you target if you have a CompTIA Security Plus certified ethical hacker and AWS Solutions Architect certification? You are a fresher. So the key to remember is you've done 3 certifications and now you need to develop the skills. So you're not going to get a job just by having certifications. You actually have to have the skills. Could you tell me which job in cybersecurity you're looking for? And I'd really like to help you, because the CompTIA Security Plus is what I call a prerequisite to learning security. There's not enough in that to really be there. Now, the Certified Ethical Hacker Master, the CEH Master, that one might be enough, because that's the one where you did the proctor, you proved the lab, and you proved you can break into something. So if it's the CEH Master, now we're talking. If it's just the CEH, it's another paper-based exam. And the AWS Solutions Architect is associate is a, what do you call it? It's a vocabulary test with some how-to. Now, you can get any job you want, and the key is I want you to know, but certifications do not equal skills. So my basic intro-level security certification that I provide and teach as part of all of our programs is the CISSP. And I don't even consider that to be the security certification. I give that to everyone as their fundamentals in security. Whether I train a cloud architect and enterprise architect, they all receive CISSP training. For the enterprise architects, it doesn't always make sense to take the certification. For the cloud architects, it gets in interviews like crazy. So the key is, what job would you like to do? And from once you tell me what job you would like to do, I could tell you exactly. Do you want to do something in cloud computing? Because if you want to do something in cloud computing, I would love to help you. Love to help you, love to help you, love to help you. So just tell me what you would like to do, and then I can help you get there. But don't rely on certifications alone. And here's the reason we have to be very specific. All those fresher jobs that existed 20 years ago, they don't exist anymore. There's a series on this YouTube channel of how to get hired when you're a fresher, where I talked about why those jobs where people did these entry-level jobs no longer exist. See, what happened is we used to have a lot of people to rack and stack and do those little basic things like install operating systems. And then we went to the cloud, and I can have one DevOps engineer replace 50 of those people that used to do that work. So that's where the intro-level jobs went. And that got further exacerbated by, you have to be better than AI to work. And AI is about 70% of real. And you have to be better than AI. And you're going to, in order to be better than AI, you're going to need more than where you're at. So tell me exactly the job you want, and then I'll tell you exactly what to do. And if you want, if you come to any of our architecture webinars, if you want, I'll actually give you a free assessment. I'll interview you on there. You tell me the job you want, and I'll give you an interview, and I'll tell you what skills you have versus what skills you're lacking. How do you create a crowd architect portfolio? Like, what do you include? A website with design. So, Jose, if I've now seen about 100 people send me resumes with a portfolio on it, and all 100 of them, I never looked further. And here's the reason why. So let's say you're working to be a cloud architect. You have to remember, as a cloud architect, it's a $250,000 a year job. And as you move into senior roles, there'll be $500,000 or more. Now, when you're taking a $250,000 a year job or higher, what you're actually trying to do, what you are, is you're now an executive. And the executive has the Mercedes look. I don't care, BMW, whatever, Porsche, whatever. But they've got the classy look. They've got the classy feel. And everything about you looks, screams, and communicates business executive. Now, if you now create a website and you're not a web developer where you can create the equivalent of a $100,000 website that looks like a Mercedes website, every time people slop together a website because they're not a web developer, when we get this, they're now trying to apply for a $250,000 job, and I got a website that makes them look like a high school person that put a website together. I'm exaggerating the point, Jose. I'm not saying that's you, but the point is if you want a $250,000 job, your portfolio has to reflect it. And unless you can create a website like that, it's not there. So the reality is, here's what your portfolio is. And if you're one of our students, here's how you'll create it. You'll actually do real architect work. So if you respond to an RFP, you'll have a real RFP. If you create an architecture for something, you'll have real architectures. You'll have disaster recovery plans, business continuity plans, and all the architectural artifacts you've created. Now, because you'll have the ability to put them down, at least if you're well, the things that you did in your career. Did this, did this, did this, did this, did this is real resume stuff. That's your resume. And we have to remember, what do cloud architects do? We don't configure the tech, we design it. So a business continuity plan, a disaster recovery plan, where do you put that? You would put it on a Medium blog. Prove you're an architect. Half of what we do as architects is create content and create documentation. Prove it. Create real thought leadership document and show me. And don't just slap together something in a couple hours. Take a week or two for each thing that you do. Get your facts, get your statistics, cite it from reputable sources. Have a nice analysis. Have your points substantiating your analysis and show you're an architect. I do that. Every article I write, I get at least 10 people that want to hire me, because that's what architects do. Now, when I go on an interview and people ask a question, I take a nice leather folio with me. And when was the last time you've done an RFP? Well, actually, here's some sample RFP responses that I've led. And that way I have something to show and prove when it comes down to being there in person, and always opt for the in-person interview. But go out there and create content. Now, create a Medium blog. Why? Medium's a very reputable place. Everybody uses it. And now you're not the owner of the blog. It's all about your content and now your design. But the second you own anything, it's all about you and what you represent. So when you walk in a cloud architect interview, it's not like an interview for an engineer. There's going to be lots of presentations. They're going to be examining whether they can put you in front of, say, the C-suite audience. They're going to be examining your executive presence. They're going to be examining your leadership. Now, if you have the ability to put together what would look like a $100,000 website, sure, go create an architecture portfolio. But if you don't, go out there and create real thought leadership, the same kind of content we do. Prove to the world you know what architecture is. Talk about the difference between architecture and engineering. Talk about what it takes to drive transformation. Talk about, for example, the weaknesses in cloud security that might make us now need a zero trust because we lack those hard perimeters that we used to have. Talk about AI's impact on X, Y, Z, whatever. Talk about AI, what AI can be used in reference architectures, but that's your portfolio. Some things belong on professional blogs. Some things you can post on LinkedIn. But the key not to do is create a website when you're trying to look like an executive, unless your website looks like it's an executive, because that then destroys your brand. So I kind of hope that helps, because it's a great question. How to prepare for an AWS job architect interview. So I'm going to help you with a couple of things. One is I actually have about 15 videos that will help you on the cloud architect interview, which is the same as the AWS solutions architect interview. The next key to remember is it's not an engineering job. So, and here's what a real architect interview will be like. So I'll have some polite conversations with you over the phone to determine if they should talk to you. And then after that, they're going to give you a business case, a case study, just like they would in any MBA program. And the case study is going to explain some challenges the customer is having and what the goal is. And you're going to have to create an architecture. Now, you're going to have to not only create that architecture, you're going to have to present that architecture to 4 to 5 people. You're going to have to show them the business value in that architecture and the digital transformation that architecture would bring. And if you can win that interview, typically speaking, you're hired. But I'm going to tell you what an architect interview could go like right now. And then when I do that, it's for your purposes, but it's also to show you the difference between engineering and architecture. So if I'm a solutions architect and I understand what my customer's weighted average cost of capital is, I understand certain things. So if I were to ask you, how does a company's weighted average cost of capital determine whether they should put their workload in a private cloud or a data center versus a public cloud? How would you answer that? Now, if you're on an AWS architect interview, as you suggested, and someone asked you, could you compare and contrast the differences between context-aware IAM and role-based access control, the strengths and the weaknesses, and why role-based access control may not be enough? Would you be able to do that? If I were to ask you, how would you design a 99.999% high availability strategy across multiple clouds? How would you do that? Now, if I were to ask you why you can't use DynamoDB in 98% of customers, how would you be able to answer that? If I were to ask you, could you tell me the times where a microservices architecture will provide a real value to the business versus when it will hurt the business? Whereas a monolithic architecture better for the business and where would it hurt the business? And be able to justify your trade-offs and business rationale why. Now that would be something that would be on an interview. Could you tell me how you would design your demilitarized zone for access to a website, for example? That would be something that would be on an interview. So the key is make sure you know architecture, because it's not going to be how do you configure this or how do you click 3 boxes. It might be, could you compare and contrast block storage, object storage, file storage? Where do they excel? What are each storage's strengths? What are each storage's weaknesses? How do they fit into the overall storage ecosystem? Meaning, where would you use it? How would you work around any performance-based constraints in these storage solutions? Because they're not as fast as what you had in the data center. So on an architect interview, I might ask, like for solutions architect interview, how would you size a virtual machine? How would you determine the amount of CPU cores versus the CPU frequency of each core versus the amount of DRAM you need? That's what you're going to see on a solutions architect interview. What are the real benefits to an organization? Explain them to me by migrating towards cloud computing. What do they gain? What are the lose? What are the trade-offs? That's what a solutions architect job interview is going to be. And the reason is that's what solutions architects do. So you have to have the skills. So if you've not been taught, how do you size a virtual machine? You're not going to be able to do anything. If you don't understand, for example, how does a host connect to a web server and how does the host leave the LAN, how all of its packets forwarded across the wide area network like the internet, how TCP sets up a connection between the end user and the web server, you're not going to pass a solutions architect interview because you need to understand that in order to be able to to design it. And that's why people that do the hands-on labs and get hundreds of certifications, the name of something and how to, never make it on an architect interview. You would like to become a Gen AI architect? Wonderful. You have signed up for the program, would like to complete it by January next year. You work as a data center technician. Is it doable? It depends on how fast you learn. It really depends on how fast you learn. So it depends on how good your communication skills are. It depends on how good your leadership skills are. It depends on how good your sales skills are. It's going to be more dependent upon your executive presence, those types of skills, than it's actually going to be there. Now, working as a data center technician will teach you how to build stuff, which is great. But here it's going to be more of an architecture thing. So it's going to be understanding how to design the underlying architecture to a degree, understanding what kind of models you would use, how you would train them, what your data structure could be, more of how you're preventing attacks on the AI system. For example, if you abusify data so that no one can see it, you don't want the AI actually bringing the data back so that it could be seen, potentially speaking. You don't want your AI models getting corrupted, because if they are, they're going to do certain things that are potentially not over there. So kind of keep that in the back of your mind. So could you do it in 6 months? Yes, I've had people do it in absolutely 6 months. I had Richard O get hired by AWS in 3 weeks. I had Joe M get hired by AWS in about a month, but he was a dual CCIE, and and even though he was a CCIE, he was also working as a data center sales rep for Cisco, so he had very good sales skills. I can tell you, Yvonne, college student hired by AWS in about 6 months. I can say Delroy Bat, I'll use that as an example, with someone that never worked in tech, came with us, got an engineering job about 3 months into it, and then a year later got an architect role, but he had no roles before I found us. So the key to remember is, yes, you can do it. Could you do it in 6 months? I don't know. Will it take you 8 months? Will it take you 10 months? Will it take you 12 months? I can't guarantee that. But what I can say is I expect you to stay in this program until the day you're hired. We are not a boot camp or the anti-boot camp. All I care is that you get hired. So whether you're hired by January or whether it's March, I can't guarantee that. But what I can say is stay in the program until you're hired. But a lot of it's based upon how fast you learn. My wife learned Spanish in 2 weeks because her translators couldn't understand her thoughts. I'm not joking. But, me, it takes 6 months to learn a language. So, I'm a lot slower than Lisa, my wife. So just think of it that way. But I know you will be working as an AI architect in the future, and I think you're going to love it. I think it'll be the best job you've ever had. But time, we all learn at different paces. We all have a different amount of time each day. But I know it'll be the best thing you've ever done in your life, and it'll be a better career than you've ever imagined. And, if you want, I can assess some of your skills on say, one of the Friday soft skills classes, and I can see how close you are and let you know that as well after I speak to you. And then I can give you much more information. But I know you're going to have a great career, and I can't wait till the day you tell me and David Lithicum that you're hired. If transitioning from a non-tech career into becoming a cloud enterprise architect, how do you get recognized by recruiters reaching out to you in this difficult market? So Tommy J, it's not a difficult market for architects. There is a massive shortage of architects. And guess what? People prove to me every single day when they make a post or a LinkedIn thing that they're not an architect. When somebody has a LinkedIn profile that says cloud engineer / cloud architect, we can't even talk to them. And here's the reason. If they don't even know the difference but what the job is, how could they possibly do the job? So that's kind of what we talk about. So we use 5 steps. And I am very adamant of these 5 steps. The first step is you have to be proficient in the job. And you not only have to be proficient, and this is where, and then I'll tell you why people failed the interview afterwards, but I want you to understand it first. And I'll give you the statistics and sources behind that too, just so you truly understand. But the key is first, you have to have top 25% skills. And when you have top 25% skills and you've done things like you would in our program, you'll have the right stuff to put on your resume. And it'll be the right things that will get people to come to you, the right people to come to you. Now, remind what I said, top 25% skills. Now, if you learn from AI, like most people do, they go to ChatGPT, they're never going to get hired. And I'll tell you why. If you learn from ChatGPT, which is 70% effective, and you're as good as you get, you become 60% effective. If you can remember 90% of it, you're not as good as AI. So they'll immediately, anybody that studies via ChatGPT, I know they won't have much of a career. So keep that in the back of your mind. So top 25% skills, master those skills, master all of them. After you have the top 25 skills, here's the next phase. And this is what we do in our training. You have to be what the hiring manager wants. I'm going to tell you right now, Tommy J, 89% of people failed job interviews due to lack of soft skills. 89%. So the next phase after being great is being what the hiring manager wants. After that, it's creating a real portfolio. And part of your portfolio is content you're going to be creating to show the world in the right way that you do your job. Now, at that point, once you're in the top 25% skills, and the only way to do that is to learn from the best, is to be the best. That's why we use all principal architects, distinguished architects, chief architects for the most part as our primary instructors. And that way we make sure you learn from the people that have done the things that nobody else has even seen. And that way you are in the top 24%. Now, if you've got top 25% skills and you're what the hiring manager wants, which makes you about 9 times more likely to be hired. And after you've got a real portfolio, now it's time for the branding and certification phase. So when I train a cloud architect, that cloud architect leaves my program with a CISSP, which is my intro to security fundamentals, but we go much deeper than that. But, they get that as basic security fundamentals. You put a CISSP on your resume, you're getting interviews. The AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert or the Google Professional Cloud Architect, they won't teach you anything about the role, but they'll get you interviews, so it's part of our strategy. And then we teach and typically recommend TOGAF 10. And the reason we recommend TOGAF 10 is it's an enterprise architecture certification. So why do we do these? Once you put those 3 certifications on your LinkedIn portfolio and resume, now the world's going to start being very interested in you. But if that's all you had was the certifications, they'd never hire you, because you still have to have the top 25% skills, have to be what the hiring manager wants. And we spend a lot of time teaching it because it makes you 9 times more likely to get hired. Have to have a real proper portfolio that proves you are an expert at the job, as opposed to not knowing what the job even is, which is what most people do. Now, after that, that's when we do the certification. Now, after certification, what you now need to do is you need to create an expert resume. Now, we do this as part of where we teach you how to create an expert resume, a resume that is geared towards hiring managers and recruiters, because it's going to show exactly what they need and what they're looking for. A resume that will get you responses. And generally speaking, by tuning and optimizing a resume, you're 230% more likely to get interviews. So by focusing, second thing, on being the soft skills, which knocks out 90% of the people, and interview train and making sure your resume is optimal, that makes you 2.3 times more likely, and it's a critical part of our system. Now, that's still not enough. The next thing is LinkedIn, and you have to focus on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is massive. You have to create the right profile. You have to get it to the point where someone can see it, read it, and within 5 seconds say, I want to interview or not. It has to be that good, because 95% of recruiters source their candidates on LinkedIn, and they typically spend, statistically speaking, less than 7 seconds evaluating your profile. So if you've got a bunch of skills up there, it's all gone. If it's a cloud architect, pipe cloud engineer, and you don't know the job, it's all gone. If you don't have an executive summary of 25 words or less that shows why I want to learn more about you, it's all gone. So we do that, and then we teach our students how to create content. Robert was a student of mine. Every time he created a post, he got 5-6 interview requests. So getting interviews is nothing. Getting hired is nothing. But the key is you've got to do everything before you actually go out there and optimize your resume, because it's got to prove to the world you're an architect. And then the last phase, if you train with us, is interview training. And I'm going to tell you why interview training matters and why it's the biggest secret that everybody forgets. What if I told you that almost everyone fails the interview? I'm going to tell you why approximately 90% of the people fail the cloud architect interview in a second, to make it very clear for you, because I want it to be optimal. But we work on the interview. Why? I've never been on an interview that I've never been hired on. And yet 90+% of the people fail the interview for the architect role. So by training the interview, you can be at least 10 times more likely to hire. And it's all those things that add up. The soft skills makes you 9 times more likely to get hired. The interview, the resume work, it just by itself is about 2.3 times. That automatically gets you to about 27 or 25 or so. Multiply that times 10 for interview training, and you're 250 times more likely to get hired. I say 150 to 200. That's the key of the secret. The secret is all of that long before you do your branding. And then people will come to you because they'll see you as an expert, because you will be. That's what you do. And then you start calling recruiters as well. And then when you share your expert resume with them and you've had a conversation, you'll stick out in their mind. Great questions. Hi, Mike. You're new to our channel. I can tell how much knowing Java leverage and edge for someone to be as a cloud engineer. So here's the thing. A cloud engineer is not a software developer, so that's not really going to be an edge for them. Java would be a big edge for a web developer. Now, a cloud engineer would get a big benefit out of knowing Python as a general rule, but it's not going to hurt the cloud engineer to know Java, but it's not going to be that much of an impact, because they're not software developers. A cloud engineer is building what we architects design. So that will be building things with containers, building things with virtual machines, infrastructure as code, some DevOps stuff, that kind of thing. So there's that. Now, please do keep in your mind that certain jobs cannot be replaced by AI, like a cloud architect, a solutions architect, or an AI architect, or an enterprise architect. Here's the reason why. These jobs involve a lot of communication. They involve a lot of stakeholder leadership. They involve a lot of sales. They involve leading architecture teams. They involve exercising influence. They involve preventing. They involve evaluating trade-offs, for example. All things that only humans can do. Much of the work of cloud engineers can be done by AI, and we had a cloud engineering program which I stopped selling 2 years ago. And the reason our company stopped selling it is we know that at least 50% of cloud engineers will be replaced by AI. So if cloud engineering is something you desire, please know that that's one of the jobs that's going to be replaced by AI. AI can't do any architecture roles. AI can't do sales roles. AI can't do sales engineering roles. AI can't do executive roles. And the World Economic Forum came up with a list of skills very recently, and they're things like creative thinking. Actually, I've got the exact list directly in front of me. Let me open it up because it's pretty. And I'll see if I can share it with you. So let me see if I can share this real quick because it's something I want you to understand. If we look at core skills, and then I show you which skills are going and which skills are here. Be very careful with engineering jobs. These are the jobs that you consider that are considered out of focus skills. And why is that? Because AI is becoming better and better at doing these things each day. That's things like programming, for example. That's more that engineering, math, reading math kind of work. Now, if we look at what the future skills are, I'm going to map this back to the architect world. AI and big data. Well, there's not a single cloud architect, enterprise architect, AI architect, security architect that's not working with this in some way, shape, or form. Technological literacy. Well, a cloud engineer would have that, but obviously so would a cloud architect. Now, as architects, we're forced to think creatively. How do we design a new business process? We want to do a multi-cloud architecture. How do we deal with this? We want to ship a firewall into a country, but it's not allowed because of an embargo somewhere along the line. Thinking job. The only systems thinking job involve medicine, for example, and architecture, where you're thinking about what is the impact to the system of making one change. For example, if we open up a port on the firewall, what's the impact on the entire system that we actually have across the entire company? Empathy and active listening, that is, again, is future skill. And why is that so critical? Because in a world where the machines are doing most of the work, most of the engineering, most of the doing stuff, which is where we're headed, people that can deal with people, understand people's needs, lead a team, that's required. Again, perfect cloud architect skill. They could have wrote the job description for architecture careers. Leadership and social influence. Well, you're going to have to lead a team, lead and influence stakeholders, lead and influence the C-suite of the board. And analytical thinking. Do I use the AWS WAF, which lacks behavioral and anomaly detection? Or do I use a checkpoint WAF for next generation firewall, which can do that? What's the impact of that on my security? Those are the roles and things of the future. So I'm not saying that you can't be a cloud engineer. I just want you to understand the risks of that career versus other jobs that are more immune, like a cloud architect or a solutions architect. Just please keep that in the back of your mind. That's why I don't recommend cloud engineering jobs, because unfortunately me and every other architect I know are in a position now where we're trying to enhance efficiency of organizations. And it's that back end people that are going, and it's being replaced by more strategists and things like that. So just keep that in the back of your mind. I love cloud engineers, love them, love them, love them. But I feel bad for them knowing where the industry is going. Bear with me. Chris from my team will bring in the next one. Tobogo Smart. Hi, I'm so passionate about the Microsoft 365 space. However, I'm not sure where I should specialize in. What are the advantages or disadvantages of being an architect? So let's get out of the Microsoft 365 space for a minute, because that's a software as a service product. And Microsoft has already said that software as a service products are dead. And that comes straight from the CEO. So, and the reason is AI will be so good in the future, a couple of years from now. There's like $1 trillion being invested in the next few years in AI, and it will make it 10 times better than what we have right now. So companies will just say, I want an Office application that does this, and this, and the code will be spit out automatically from AI. So there's that. Now, what are the advantages of being an architect? Well, if you're an architect, you won't be replaced by technology, which is one thing. If you're an architect, like a cloud architect, security architect, what have you, enterprise architect, your average pay is in that $200,000 to $250,000 range. We're moving into a chief architect role can pay, say, between $500,000 and $800,000 a year. The architect job, because it has so much business, so much tech, so much leadership in it, and these are 75% business jobs and 25% tech at best. It puts you in a position where you're ready to move up into management. You're ready to move up into C-suite. So architecture careers now were like the management and strategy consulting, the careers of yesterday, where you get done your MBA, and as soon as you do it, you join McKinsey, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, what have you, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they would tell you how to dress, what to dress, where your shoes should be polished, which fork to use. I'm not joking. How to present, what to say, which kind of socks go with which. And they prepare you in like a finishing school for going into the world. I also do that in all of our architecture trainings. But when you're done that, you now have the skills to get all these great business executive jobs in every company. And here's the thing. In every architecture I've ever worked, I've spoken to the C-suite, I've spoken to the board, I've spoken to the senior leadership. So after being an architect, I can literally call most chief information officers that I've worked with, which is a lot, and say, do you have any open positions? And I can tell you almost any of them would hire me in a spot because they've told me. So that's the key. There's lots of reasons to be an architect. And it's a job of the future versus a job of the past. Pays real well, lots of career advancement. And I can tell you, Thibaut Go Smart, I've had a couple jobs in my life. I paid my way through college by being a paramedic. I practiced internal medicine as a nurse practitioner. And then I worked as a network engineer for 3 of the worst months of my life. It was the hardest job ever for low pay. And then I moved into my first architecture job, and it doubled and then tripled my salary. I no longer was coming in at 2:00 in the morning to fix things that was broken. And I just got paid to do something I loved. And I don't think I've ever worked a day in my life since I moved into architecture. But that's just me. I love architecture. I love every bit of it. I've loved working as a security architect. I love working as a network architect, an enterprise architect. I love it all. It's the most fun job I've ever had. So I'm biased, but I love it. Great question. What would you need to include in the executive summary of a CV for an information security manager? Let me try to think about it. I'm going to try to do this live. Accomplished information security manager with XYZ number of years experience protecting an organization from harm. Experience leading large information security teams, experience collaborating across the organization, experiencing mentoring other individuals, and experience presenting to the C-suite and the board. That's typically what I would want in somebody that would be a manager level. Nothing longer than that. Because that's going to say, okay, this person knows how to protect an organization from harm. That's their actual job. And they told me that they had all the skills that I actually care about in a manager. Those would be what I would be looking for. Now, if I had more than live, I probably could make it a little smoother, but something like that is exactly what we're looking for as hiring managers when we see that resume. Great question. You're interested in cloud and DevOps roles, but you're not sure which one you should choose or focus on right now, regardless of what I like more. What would be a better place to start? I love this question. So here's what I want to say. We're going to have to further define it. And the reason we have to further define it, and cloud basically encompasses every job whatsoever. And DevOps is a type of job. So let's talk about what I mean. We could have cloud architects that design a multi-cloud solution, and that is one very specific set of skills on the cloud. We can have software developers that are coding on the cloud. We could have an application architect that designs an application structure on the cloud or off the cloud. We can have an AI architect that designs an AI strategy, for example. We could have a security architect that designs a security protection strategy. And let's talk about that strategy. So let's say you wanted to go fly through a highly secure airport. When you go to that, let's just say, and let's talk about what it would create. So if you were going to create the strategy between a highly secure airport You would have properly trained security people. Most of those security people would have been in the military for at least several years, potentially law enforcement after that. Everyone from the cleaning staff would be trained in security, what to look for, what to know, and ideally, even the cleaners would have been inside of the military. This organization would have very strong incident response procedures, for example. This organization would have rapid response procedures. This organization would have boundaries and levels of protection. I see you writing. I'm sure you can imagine an airport like this. So that would be the security strategy. And that's what the architect does. Now, a cloud engineer, by comparison, is someone that builds and sets up what the architect designed on the cloud, which is another job. Now, on the cloud, we have people that are big data architects that design a big data strategy. And on the cloud, we actually have people that actually build certain things that as pertains to data on the cloud. So we have a lot of different jobs. So as soon as we get very specific with the job we're actually referring to, now we can give you the exact set of skills. What can I tell you is severely in demand right now? Cybersecurity is extremely in demand. There's globally a security shortage of about 5 million people right now. Massive shortage of cybersecurity. So cloud security will have a tremendous amount of options for you. I'm going to tell you why I'm very cautious of DevOps roles coming very soon. But cloud security could be a big option. It could be from the security design, or honestly, even from the security protection. They're still relatively short of cybersecurity people. Now, when it comes to solutions architect, clouds architects, enterprise architects, there's a massive security shortage. In fact, most companies say they're the hardest jobs to recruit for, but they have vacancies exceeding 60 days because there's lack of talented staff. And that applies to any architecture role. So there's a lot of roles you could do. Would you be able to join us, potentially speaking, tomorrow on our How to Get Your First Architect Job webinar? What I'd like to do is ask you questions. It's at 1 p.m. for me, so I guess it's probably 7 hours between you and me. So it'll be around 8 o'clock at night, maybe, I think, for you, but check your time zone. So if you want to check that, it would be really good. And what I can do is I can give you a quick interview. I can ask you, what do you enjoy? I can ask you what you want to do. And then after that, I can make recommendations because I want to get very specific. So is there something you like? And tell me now, but I'm happy to get face-to-face with you on Zoom if you'd like. But is there something in particular you would like to do? Something you find interesting? Designing AI systems, building AI systems, because that's also done on the cloud and off the cloud. Now, DevOps, I'm a little cautious on. And the reason I'm relatively cautious on is DevOps is kind of related to software development. And so much software development is going by the wayside to AI. How bad is it? Salesforce is doing 50% of their work with AI. Microsoft is doing 25% of their work with AI, and that was about a year ago. They're doing more. Google a year ago was writing about 25% of their code with AI. So AI agents should be able to do some of those DevOps engineering type things and DevOps process type things, and it can also do a lot of the coding. So DevOps generally concerns me about the future, which is why I generally don't recommend those roles. Now, if you do and you want them, there are things you can do. You can just be the best of the best in an engineering role, because the reality is the best of the best will always be needed. It will be always needed. But what we don't need are people that are not as good as AI. And unfortunately, that's about 30 to 40% of the people that are out there. So keep that as you start looking for it. But all these roles are good. What would you enjoy? That's my biggest thing. We figure out what you would enjoy. From there, definitely, we can definitely find something that's going to make you happy and build you a career that you can grow with and love. Hi, Mike, you're interested in security for AI. Which program should you join? The AI program or the security program? The security program. And I know it's a tough sort of thing, but the reality is in AI, there's a certain subset of security we do, but the reality behind the security that we're describing, we're talking about protecting everything, not just the AI. And if I can give you a general guide, the closer you are, the more strategic you are to the top, the better you will be. So I would definitely join the security architecture program. No, don't get me wrong. There'll be AI things that you'll learn along the way because it's important. In fact, my security architects right now are doing an AI security architecture project right now, where they're creating this AI security architecture, and they're going to have to present it back to us. And when we hear back from them, we'll be evaluating on their architecture, the quality of their architecture, the decisions they made behind their architecture, the trade-offs they considered, their presentation skills, their business acumen. And we'll give them the same kind of feedback they would do in an actual architecture job. Gave them an RFP, they'll respond to the RFP, they'll create the architecture, present the architecture. So you'll get everything you need in our security architect program. And if you join us now, you can see some of these architecture presentations are coming really, really, really soon on AI architecture. Our students are really doing a nice job on this, and they make me proud every day. But definitely the security program for AI security. Great question, and thank you for asking. Hello, Mike. You mentioned that those joining any of your programs can start attending the live training that are ongoing, but wouldn't that be somewhere in the middle of the course when we jump in? So no, John. So let me tell you how physicians train, and let me tell you how martial artists train. I am both a martial artist and a medical professional. So when I first started martial arts, you know what I learned? That it wasn't just people that never started martial arts before in their life. There were black belts, there were brown belts, there were orange belts, yellow belts, green belts. Now, I've studied every martial art you can think of over the last 30 years, but the key was we were all not new. Now, what's wrong with an all-new program? You got 30 people in there that know nothing about anything, and none of them can support each other. And when you train a physician, you have fourth-year residents, third-year residents, second-year residents, first-year residents. They all work together. And the more senior people work with the more junior people, and everybody gets better together. Because in the process of helping to explain it to others, they get better themselves. So that's the way physicians train. Now, in martial arts, it's the same way. So here's what I do. So the online portions of the program that you use when you take our course are self-paced. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. Now, when we teach architecture classes, our live classes are independent of the content inside of there. And we use what I call immersion therapy. So if you ever been in another country and after a couple months, you just speak the language and you don't even remember, you didn't even take any classes. Somebody said something, you looked in your dictionary, and the next thing you realize you did that. I was working in Panama, and at one point I was speaking Spanish that way because I was there for so long. I just had to. So immersion training. So what we do in our live classes is, let's say today we're designing something or we're talking about something. I'll have that same conversation 2 months from now. So no matter when everybody joins, they all get every single one. Plus I record, and students of ours get access to every single class we've ever taught throughout the history of it. So they're never really behind on anything. But when you do the things that are self-paced, that gets you on your own terms. And by being immersed in it, it's the same time. So it's kind of like taking Spanish classes on your own pace and then going to Spain. And while you're taking the Spanish classes, you pick up some extra words along the way. And then you go back and you do some more classes. And now you have a bigger conversation with people at the restaurant. Okay, fine. Now you're able to communicate with all your food in Spain. And now it's time to go to the store and start buying clothes and figuring out how to do that. And the things you're learning in class and the time you're learning in Spain. And by doing that, John, I never have a group of people that don't know anything, because I've got people that are they just joined us, that are working together with teams of people that are ready to graduate and be hired any day. I've got some people with 20 years experience. I've got people from different careers that also offer some incredible career experience. And just like the way you would train a physician or an elite martial artist, you are with us until you are hired. And that's why we do that. So you won't be in the middle of anything. I mean, granted, you might be, for example, if we're doing an architectural project, you might be in the middle of that project for another week or two. And then after that, we're going to start fresh. So I kind of hope that helps. I don't have a lot of time left for questions, but I do have a few more minutes. If you've got some questions, please get them in now. And because I really want to do anything I can to help you build your better cloud architect career, security architect career, AI architect career, or any job you really like. Thoughts about cloud security roles? Well, I'm going to tell you to get a security role, not a cloud security role. And here's the reason. So 5 years ago, when we started our program, I taught 100% of our students private clouds, hybrid clouds, and multi-cloud. And the reason I did this was as follows. I knew that cloud computing, typically speaking, would cost 200 to 300% of normal data center computing. I knew after a couple of years of companies trying single cloud solutions and having the cloud providers go down, they were going to go to what we always did, the hybrid multi-cloud solution. And how do I know this? We saw the same goofy thing happening in networking 30 years ago, and it's just a repeating of history. So the key with security is you have to be able to secure things in the cloud and out of the cloud. So if all you know is cloud security, you're not going to be good enough. So what we do is we train security architects and then we train them in cloud. And I think cloud security roles are excellent, but cybersecurity roles across the cloud and the data centers, which are now clouds, are much better. They're more sophisticated because you can see the end-to-end, and architecture is about all end-to-end. So I love cloud security roles. There is a massive shortage of people that know anything, and I mean anything, about security. And there is a massive shortage of people that even know anything about cloud computing. In fact, Euclides Perez, here's what I did. When I started this company, I did an assessment. I actually did an interview of about 1,000 AWS certified people. And I asked them to define cloud computing. They couldn't. I asked them to tell me what an EC2 instance is and what it really was under the hood, how to size it. Not a single person could. Now, when I asked those 1,000 AWS certified people, could you tell me how I would architect a demilitarized zone for, say, a web app? No one had any idea. And when I asked people, could you tell me about block storage, object storage, file storage, how they work, where you would use them, what are the strengths and weaknesses, and how would you work around them? No one knew a single thing. And the reality is you can't work on the cloud unless you know this. And if I ask these to 1,000 AWS certified people, I can't find it. So the reality is we're drowning in a sea of underqualified AWS certified people and Azure certified people and Google certified people that know zero about cloud computing. So a real security architect or a real security engineer role where you're either protecting or building, depending upon the role you want, in and off the cloud is great, but don't limit yourself to just the cloud, because 70% of the companies are taking a lot of their stuff out of the cloud and back to the data center, just like I said they would before. So that's really the secret, and that's really going to be the magic, is to be able to work on and off the cloud. And when you have real severe security capabilities, there's nothing you can't do, because like I said, the World the Economic Forum is worried about the shortage of cybersecurity people and its impact on the global economy. And there's about 5 million cybersecurity people that are short. So keep it in security and you should be absolutely great. Well, I'm going to tell you about some free things we have coming, and if any last questions come in, great. Otherwise, I will be back doing an architecture webinar too. So let me tell you about some free things we have going on. Tomorrow, we have a How to Become an Architect webinar. And on this architecture webinar, we'll talk about what is a cloud architect, what does a cloud architect do, the skills you need for a cloud architect role, and what you need to do to stand out and get hired. Now, on that, it'll be on Zoom. So if you want me to check anything about you, I will. Want me to give you a mini interview? I will. Want me to assess your LinkedIn profile? I will. I mean, I'm more than happy to do so. I just want to be there to actually help you. So join us on this free webinar. If you want to join us right now, we've got a 50% sale on all programs. So if you want to take advantage of that, that's great. And otherwise, if you had a good time today, if you learned something, maybe give the video a like, maybe subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell to be notified of new videos to assist you in your architecture career. Whether it's cloud architecture, AI architecture, security architecture, enterprise architecture, solutions architecture, or any other architecture for that matter. Have